Okay, so welcome everybody to Workshop 2, Indigenous Language and Quebec Language Law. We have Sarah Cleary, who's here from the First Nations Education Council. It's going to be talking about everything, including Bill 96. She's on the regional committee on ancestral languages. She's the coordinator. She's also Innu artist and traditionalist from the community of Mishashu. I probably got that wrong. Sarah works towards the resurgence of skills and know-how in education among First Nations, and she coordinates the regional committee on ancestral languages. And its aim is to mobilize and inform 43 communities in Quebec and Labrador about ancestral languages. So, Sarah, welcome. It's good to have you here with us today. Miigwech.
Sarah Cleary Tishinakashin, Mashtuyat Nuchin. I'm coming from the community Innu of Mashtuyat. My sister are also Cree and Abenaki, and Innu, of course. I'll start sharing. Audio. So everybody can see it. Good. Oh, I think that's the video. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay, there we go. So name of the presentation, Our Language, Our Territories, Our Future. I'll talk about the relation with Quebec, of course, Bill 96, the law that just been implemented by government of Quebec. But I also want to revisit some of the project, and one in particular that are very successful at building new speaker. I've been in education for 6 years in First Nation Education Council. And then the speaker who's going to speak after me, Loretta Robinson. We co-found together the Reconciliation Committee at FNEC, and now I see Cynthia as well, who's part of the committee. So we're growing something in the community. It's very, for me, it's a duty. Like you said, Simon, I'm an artist, traditionalist, spiritual person, a two-spirit person. And for me, it is a duty to transmit our language, our culture. I'm a learner of the language because my father is a survival of residential school. But I put the bar very high for me to learn our teaching, our knowledge, our values. So I'm committed to be the better person I can be, and to do action that will impact the next generation. So I have a vision and I have hope that in seventh generation, our language will still be spoken in my communities, and I am responsible for that. I try to work the best that I can so we can happen in a group, a community, and with the all 43 communities in Quebec by sharing our initiative and the nice projects. I'm very sorry if my English is not the best. It's second language for me, but I'll try. I try my best. If you don't understand, please just your end ask question and let me know. So I want to start this presentation with a picture of hunter drum, elder. It's Naskapi Bellefleur. Is a traditional drummer, the drum that we drum in the Innu Nation to speak with the animal, the spirit of the animal when the hunter go for hunt. Now it's been used more for event, but we have very few of those drummers left, and it is important to connect with the spirit and to connect with our know-how those teaching, if we don't preserve them, that will go. So I want to start with him, and then honoring our elder, and also mention that I'm right now speaking to you from near Wendake, traditional territory, unceded territory of Innu, Wendat people and Abenaki people. So a lot of nations have been there to share and trade in the past. So a little word about the First Nation Language Regional Committee. It is very new as a committee. It started only last year. I'm in position since May, and the committee mission is to mobilize and unite communities in order to be better informed and united for the First Nation language in Quebec, Labrador. The committee can also produce tools and provide service to help protect and revitalize our language. So right now, I have to admit that we are really focusing on defense of interest. The chief of First Nation Assembly Quebec Labrador, they give the mandate to the regional committee to defend the interest by a resolution in September. Those are the First Nation language in Quebec. We count 10 First Nation language and from 2 different families of language. So I'll go fast on this. There are situated in vitality language, different, the vitality of these language varies. Sorry, some are spoken as first language, like the Atikamekw language. So in some communities, we can say that almost 99% of the population speak the language. Most of them are only spoken by a few bunch of speakers or less. And we have the situation of the Wendat language, who's in dormant. So pretty much all around Quebec, Labrador, there's a lack of resource in the revitalization. So teaching, building curriculum, things like that, we really need to build a resource and capacities. And we do not have an organization like First People Cultural Council, for example, who are dedicated to the preservation, transmission and revitalization of our language for the 43 communities. We only have the committee so far, and I'm alone right now. So, but I hope to, and I plan to build something stronger in the years to come. However, we have some organizations that are do have this responsibility for donation. We have the Institut Chekapesh, and the Cree also have organization. So very fast, you're probably aware that in Quebec, we have been colonized by French and English as well. So we have this situation where half of our community speaks mostly French, and the other speak English or as first or second language. So this context in Quebec create really an environment for the implementation of assimilationist and discriminatory law and measure, just like La Loi 101, Bill 101, and Bill 96. I'll talk about this a little bit in the end of the presentation. So our language, our territories, our future, just wanna, it feels like people who were there for the event presentation this morning, we can almost see that we phone each other because I was totally agree with him, and then I have the same vision, if I can say so. Our language are connected to our identity, our culture, our ceremonies. They carry word views, perspective, values, and ancestral knowledge. And I'd like to give an example about this. And then if you know the morpheme and the signification of the morpheme, the little piece of words, they carry this vision. There's vision of the world, those perspective. And if I take one word in my language, Shekaikan means lake in English, but in the language, when you understand the meaning of the world, it's mean the beings that you love, the beings that you taking care of. So if we only teach words to the children or the learners, well, they don't understand really the true meaning and the depth of the language. So that's why linguists are very important, to know really how beautiful and how we're going to pass on those values. So when you teach that vision of the world by one word, you can really pass on the values to the learners. It is our responsibilities and our duty to protect them and to transmit them to future generation. I told you, I make it my responsibilities and duties. And then now we're talking, and then our crowd, it's administrator, and they have this power to change the future of those generation to come by implementing program, implementing really project that will impact the learning of the language in their environment they're working in. And it could start with something very small, by trying to go more on the land, on the territory, with the kids, and then see how we can bring back our know-how. Our know-how is it's very strong. We used to be building very strong individual, very strong ways of transmitting our values and our language and our culture. So I'd like to really sometimes invite you to decolonize our way of thinking and try to get inspired by our ancestors and our elders, and see how they succeed building strong people. And then it's in context of relation, it's in context of learning the process of the learner, respecting the process of the learner. And then I'd like you to feel this pressure today, that you can change the future of the generation to come. So our language are grounded in territories. Territories gives our language stabilities and facilitate language preservation and transmission based on a traditional method, and it's used to teach our children about our culture and our values. Our language are the first official language of our territories that you won't read in the Indigenous language law, but for many years, people like in Quebec, like John Martin, who's chief in education, like he's claiming this, and he's claiming this in the name of our ancestors and for the generation to come. So we have to use those words today. Our language are the official language of our territories and of Canada's. When me and John, we talk about this for the consultation of the implementation of Indigenous language law, they didn't keep those in the law. They're afraid, but I think we should not be afraid to claim this very loud these days. So I have a video of an initiative. It's, I think I have time, in Quebec, in Lestugouche, who are very successful building new speaker. I've seen people from this program. It's Forest Kindergarten program. Those two teachers, one is in particularly immersion in Mi'kmaq language immersion, and they create new speakers there, starting in nursery. What is very amazing about this program is sometimes those children, they don't have grandparent or parent speakers. So it is possible for us to, by programming, by having a very strong and fierce school programming, changing this the stats and create new speakers. So I hope it's going to work.
But even like when we were talking about starting the program, it's really important for any First Nation schools on reserve to jump at this opportunity, because there's a lot less red tape, you know, that you have to go through in terms of starting a program like this. So really how it started was I just went to the administration and I said, look, I'm witnessing all of these issues in my classroom. The kids are not happy. There's not, you know, meaningful learning happening. Can I do this? And it was basically just like, okay, try it out.
I think the program is great, and I wish that they had that for all the classes, because you see these kids get to learn hands-on, and they're out in the nature, and they get to have some sort of connection with what they're learning, right? And they have a meeting at the end of all their lessons, instead of being sitting in the class and looking at a book or looking at a picture on a board, you know.
And with the language being incorporated with their program too, because he's in the Mi'kmaq kindergarten program, yep. It gives him a better understanding of who he is and where he comes from, because he knows the language from birth from our parents who had taught him, so he's a fluent speaker, and it enhances his language at the same time.
Watch your little ball. Your little ball's gonna move around.
They miss it. I wish that the program could continue further on in the years. Like in grade 1 now, that they're spending most of their day indoors, and they do miss that element of being outdoors.
Oh, I think it's great. My son loved it. Every time he came home, he would be like, Mom, we went on an adventure today, or yeah, he was very in tune to nature, like just the things outside, insects, animals. It was always, Mommy, that's Mother Nature, and you know, you can't hurt Mother Nature. Or yeah, he was very in tune to his surroundings.
Would you recommend forest kindergarten to other parents?
Oh yeah. I mean, to me, I think a child is 5 years old. I don't expect them to be writing and reading when they're 5, you know. Learning should be fun. It shouldn't be, you know, stressful at a desk or trying to write with a pencil. It should be more observant and learning, and you know, they develop their motor skills through touching things and seeing things. I think it's awesome, especially in the Mi'kmaq language.
Perfect.
The 21st century, our kids are very electronically inclined, and there's no outdoor activities like how we were brought up. So it's nice to see that every day, no matter what, they're outside and doing something and getting involved and enjoying the surroundings. So love it, love it. I think it should be everywhere, just like learning about our culture in other areas, other schools. It should be, how would I say that, a prerequisite of any kind of learning. You need to know where you come from and where we came from. Everybody needs to know that we've been here since the beginning of time, and we're still here, and we're not going anywhere, and that you don't abuse our Mother Nature, that you can live with her and on her and not destroy her.
So I have to admit, it's about 5 years old, that video, and they've done so much better these days, and they continue the whole program to other grades. They now have a base camp, and this at the kindergarten level, they go out every day, rain or shine. So it's amazing to see a program that can reverse the situation. They balance the number of speakers, because of course elders pass on and go to the spiritual world, but they create new speakers, second language speakers sometimes and mostly, but still they succeed at preserving their language. Other programs that do so, Ganawage, they do also a kindergarten program. I'm not sure they're going outside every day, but still they succeed passing on the cultures and values. Other program also in the Quebec region are very good at it. Also, I want to let you know that it is possible if you plan around your language and then build on the structure that you have. And sometimes you will say, well, we don't have any speaker. Well, probably if you plan well, the first step is to build new speaker to teach your language. So very briefly, characteristic of adult education, it's based on experience and discovery, encourage children to choose whatever they want to learn. So it's very not controlled by the teacher, but it's controlled in its child-centered approach. Teacher can support and augment learning situation by creating links with the program. We have also encouraged children to explore, overcome difficulties, promote inquiries and analysis, foster autonomy and freedom, encourage creativity, getting dirty, and sensory development, enable children to expel energy, to let go and pen on emotion, in harmony with the land, nature, and the element. What is amazing in the forest kindergarten program and outdoor program, it's based on experience and example. And this is the way our ancestor and our elder used to teach. So communicate and teach still. Community and extended family have an important role in childhood education and care. Or teacher in Listigouche, they told us that sometimes if they go in the wood and then they don't know something and they find, let's say, animal track, well, they post it on Facebook and the whole community will, get involved and then want to share stories or maybe helping with the information and knowledge around the animals. So it's there, and it's really create this safe and culturally safe, secure environment for the community. Sometimes it's hard for them to go in school regarding the fact that we still carrying trauma with residential school, international trauma. So this is a very important part of the teaching on the land. Also, it's holistic. And children have their own rhythm. And one thing I really like in this way of teaching, it's the sense of inner proud that is developed into the child. So they don't do that for a gold star. If they succeed at, let's say a word or doing something that they won't been able to do a couple of weeks before, now they feel inside they don't need that much confirmation from the adult. And it is very cultural for us because it's the way we used to teach our children in the past. It's by giving them proud and fulfillment inside, and not by giving them grade or gold stars or a lot of reinforcement that way. Deeper connection with the land, of course, and language, it's learned more rapidly and more easily because it's significant in that way. Okay, well, that was my success story. Now I wanted to have a success story because the rest of the presentation will be more challenging for me. Yeah, so let's enter in the subject. Just like Devin this morning, I'd like to acknowledge that we are entering this international decade of Indigenous language. And so far, we didn't see a lot. But my challenge for you is to start planning for your own community. It's to get involved in your place where you work, to create something and to get a plan for this decade of Indigenous language. So it could be at your level. We should not expect Canada to go and make things for us. We need to make things for us right away. So I think I need to acknowledge this at the beginning. Also, for this presentation, it is essential that we remind us that First Nation are fully entitled to establish their own government language, laws, and practice on their ancestral unceded territory for the benefit of their population, and have been ensuring the sustainable development of their territory and their resource since the time immemorial, in keeping with the traditional teaching given them by the Creator. It is essential because in Quebec, it doesn't seem like it's a right. And self-determination and language right in Quebec, they didn't recognize the UNDRIP. And it is a base for us to build a real relationship with the government if they do or do not recognize the UNDRIP. So I think it's very important to mention that also in the beginning of this presentation about the relation with the government of Quebec. First Nation language and First Nation jurisdiction. So here we have to remind the government, and then very recently, that First Nation language and jurisdiction over them belong to First Nation and must be respected. On June 21st, the government of Quebec claimed they wanted to pass an Indigenous language law. And this has just happened because a lot of people in our community raised their voice against Bill 96. So now they want to say, well, okay, well, we're going to pass a law for your language. But it's not their right. It's not their jurisdiction to do so. So we have never ceded authority over our territories and our language. Our government have the duty to be the guardian of our language and to protect them and support them. Our government have the duty other government have the duty to respect our inherent jurisdiction. So I have another video for you. It's very short, but I think it's well done to explain you the Bill 96.
Koi Miguel Kuku Chache ne Jin Kazum. Je crois qu'une exemption à cette épreuve ou un allègement de l'examen pour les élèves de promenation aiderait à ceux comme moi qui parlent la langue atikamekw. Avec le projet de loi 96, ça fait en sorte qu'il y a une discrimination indirecte. C'est comme une autre barrière qu'on nous impose dans nos objectifs, là, vouloir développer notre développement personnel et académique.
I have a hard time going back to my presentation. Okay, well, let's see.
Beaucoup un moi qui parle 96, ça fait en sorte que ma personne.
Well, you can see in the presentation that the little boy who spoke first language is Atikamekw language. And for him, we expect that he's going to pass the level of the test that like he was a French first language speaker. So this is very wrong. Okay, I'm back. And then this is where you talk about indirect discrimination. So it's in the system, and still I have to remind you that the government of Quebec didn't recognize systemic racism. So this is very wrong for our student. Okay, so relation with Quebec in the past few months, it's not only Bill 96 that really put our relation with Quebec at a very low point. It's also the fact that they reject the proposal to amend Bill number 9, an act respecting a national student ombudsman. So we wanted a person to be really affected to the defense of the interests of the student of First Nation, and then that Quebec reject that. Also, the regulatory concern in education, they try to eliminate the awarding of secondary 4 credit upon success completion corresponding to secondary 5. So that was an agreement that we had before, and then they didn't want to, they want to eliminate that. The impact of the, so they passed the bill on June 1st. And then the impact on First Nation children, it's it increased systemic barrier in the learning path of the First Nation youth, jeopardize equitable access to education, create obstacle to maintain the vitality of ancestral language. In fact, it's put us in a situation, and a parent in a situation where they have to make a choice. If they want their child to succeed in the system, and Simon and I would talk about this a little earlier, well, they will be in obligation to send their student, their child in French. So that create really a prejudice against our language. And then they refused the amendment that we were proposing. And then we are not a lot of First Nation in Quebec. We are a minority. So we believe that it's not the fact that we are giving the right of our children and our students to speak the language that will affect the fact that the French is in danger in Quebec. So the change mainly are also in college. They will require 3 additional French courses for our students. They also establish a cap of number of students who may study in English, CEGEP. Also other things about the AEC and the French requirement to obtain a diploma. For the college, a lot of community near the border, they say, well, they put us in a situation where our students need to leave the province to go for their education at that level. So I said already that they refuse all the proposal made by AFNQL. They didn't want to see our perspective in that area. And I'd like to read for you maybe 2 of the sentence that really show that this government want to assimilate us in the province. And then maybe the second one, sorry. Okay. A waiver of the college requirement would ultimately, and then it's a citation from Jolin Barrette, March 16, include all Indigenous nations from Quebec society. Contrary, I think we must put the focus on the French language. We must have them participate in this in Quebec society. So they don't want us to be, they want us to be very petit Québécois, nice French person in Quebec. So we had meeting, the chief, Grand Chief Skydeer, John Martin, been also invited by Liberal government in Quebec Solidaire to present at the Assemblée Nationale de Québec, but still they passed the law. Advocacy effort in the next weeks, months to come. We are preparing a delegation to meet with the commissionary in Vancouver, commissioner and the director for First Nation to explain the case of this Bill 96. Also, we try to find funding for the defense to contest this bill. And to create a space where we can find more partnership to be able to do so. And I'd like to take a quote from John Martin when we went, him and I, in McGill to present the Bill 96 and the perspective of First Nation. He said that extinguishment is not acceptable. We will continue to fight for the right of our people, and we hope that institutions such as yours will not remain silent in their support. So if you're in a position where you feel like you have power, you can help us, you have connection, we can take all the help that you want to offer. And I'd like to finish on a quote from Sitting Bull. Let us put our mind together and see what life we can make for our children. So it gives me hope that if we work together, and that is what the committee tried to do, put all the community in Quebec in the same voice to fight together to have a better voice, a better life for our future, and building a strong generation to come. Oh, also, I want to say FNEC produced a 30-minute video on the implementation of first school, the immersion program, the Mi'kmaq immersion program. It's 30 minutes, so I didn't present it here, but maybe if you're interested in implementing that kind of program, we can take address. And also it's Cynthia Lapierre who's there in the presentation, who's charging of the forest outdoor program now at FNEC. So I'm sure it can create a healthy partnership, and then we can send you the presentation if you are interested in to see it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of people that would like to see the video. Thank you very much. Are there any questions at this point? Yeah, you did an excellent job. There's no questions. So.
Now it's me thinking I wasn't clear.
Very clear. Paulette, Dr. Tremblay would like to ask a question.
Well, Sarah Nyagoa, I totally enjoyed your presentation. I found it to be very factual, and this helps because when you have the facts at hand, all of the efforts you've gone to share the story about Bill 96 and how devastating it is fighting the giants, right? I mean, it's hard work. It makes you feel concerned, and it makes you feel hopeless sometimes, but you're doing all the right things, taking all of the right steps. And so I want to hold you up, and all of the people working on this up, because you have to, this is our time. This is reconciliation, time of reconciliation, where our voices have to be heard. We can no longer be silent. We have to step up and take on the difficult conversations and challenges that face us. So you helped us understand how big it can be and how hard, and but you're still going to do it. So, Nyagoa.
Thank you, Paulette. Any other questions? We'll track down, Sarah will track down that video through Dr. Martin, who's one of our colleagues. So thank you very much. So I'd like to introduce Loretta Robinson. She's going to be talking about implementing language and culture into provincial education system. Loretta is Naskapi Cree educator from the Naskapi Nation of Quebec of Quebec. You can fix my pronunciation. As a member of the Quebec Cree Nation of Manitoba. She's got a graduate master's in education, undergraduate degree in a Bachelor of Education and a BA from Bishop's University. She works with a variety of school boards and universities on integrating Indigenous ways of knowing in learning settings, indigenizing the curriculum, and preserving Indigenous languages in the early years. She's one of the creators of the Quebec Teacher Competency, which is valuing Indigenous pedagogy. Loretta uses this framework to support teachers in applying culturally responsive approaches in school settings. She's currently the Naskapi Curriculum Coordinator at Jimmy Sandy Memorial School. Loretta.
Hello, you can hear me well?
Yeah.
Yes, aguda. Joachim now, Jimishkum now, Danuchu Adak, Loretta and Dishantagun. Just welcomed you all in my language. My name is Loretta Robinson, and as you described, this is the work I try to do on a daily basis. It's a lot of work. But today I'm going to talk about how we as teachers, educators in my community, really push for, I think right now we're in the process of revitalizing our language. We're in a very critical state right now for the Naskapi language. When I left here 10 years ago, it was preserving. Now we've really shifted in 10 years to revitalizing. And so since my arrival home, I'll talk to you about what we do, how we try to integrate Naskapi perspectives and stories into our teaching, and the challenges we face because we are so used to the Quebec education system. We were trained as teachers in the Quebec education system, so that unlearning we're doing as teachers in the conversation we have. So I'm going to share my screen, and I have 45 minutes, right? If I'm not mistaken. 40 minutes? Yeah.
You have to 2:30. Yes.
Okay.
I got
it. So before I like to get started, I like to always share my story, because I think this story, and we all have our own stories, really shapes to how I experienced my learning, but also how I experience my role within the community. And I am trying to bring more and more voices and more stories to the work we do, and really bring back oral stories in our day-to-day lives, which has been really part of who we are. But there's been this shift of turning to books for stories. So just briefly, my journey, the top left corner is a picture of my grandfather, Joseph Sandy. This is my Naskapi part of me. My people were nomadic up to the late 1940s, which is very recent when you think of other nations. We were very nomadic until then. Although we were trading with Hudson Bay Company, we were following the caribou. The caribou was everything of our existence, our direction, our way of life. And this is a lot of the stories I heard growing up, because you had elders that were experiencing that way of life, from being nomadic to settling here in our community. The bottom left corner is a picture of my grandfather. This is my Manitoba side. My grandfather, actually both my grandparents went to Indian residential school most of their lives. So those stories were really felt. Although not told, you could tell in my grandfather's face the pain of those schools. but we never really talked about it. And it only recently do I understand why, the pain behind that. So you could see just my parents' upbringing, how I was raised are very two distinct ways, but somehow they made it come together when they raised us here in Shefferville. The top corner here, at the top, the old lady here, her name is Nishabad Elizabeth. She's my great grandma, who is half Scottish. So her father was a Hudson Bay manager. And there's stories of her resilience of hiding, not wanting to go back with her father, hiding in a bush for days. And without her strength, I think, I wouldn't have been here. We're like 200 now offspring from her. But that just shows how the Naskapis, because they were nomadic and didn't feel the need to leave a very community of togetherness, and it's still felt today. Here, the two little girls, that's my sister and I, and this is a very common thing we did growing up here. My parents made sure that we knew who we were, our way of life, really experienced that connection to land, connection to family, and making sure that we knew who we were, our stories and our history and our knowledge. And it's really like, that's how I was raised. And I think it's really shaped to the questions I have today as an educator. Here's a picture of my girl, who is now 23 today, and my little boy here, Cohen, who as I was raising my daughter to how I raise my son today, there's a huge shift where I'm really trying to bring that language and knowledge and connection to roots to my son, which has been taken away from me because I was so focused on succeeding in the Quebec education system. And I'll talk a little bit more on that as how I experienced it as a student. And here my picture of myself in my master's degree, I think, is where my voice really started to come out, where I really used my voice, a voice of my ancestors, my people, to bring forth conversations like this, sitting at tables where I'm challenging the Quebec education system, because it was never designed for my people to flourish in. And we're still very working within the rigidity of such system. And I'm not afraid to say that. And this, through my voice, I'm able to bring those questions, those challenges to people that cross my path. So that's a little bit about myself. And here is the picture of my community. And you can see, I grew up with lakes, rivers, trees, plants, animals, the four-legged, the winged animals. All of that was part of my day-to-day life up here. And talking about that now as an educator and as a mother, because my son is in preschool, how can we bring that back? And these are the conversations I'm going to share with you today. So a little bit about my community. I don't know if you know where it is. It's about 55th parallel in Quebec, very north. We're a very remote community. It's called Kaajagamas, which means near a winding lake. And through the signing of the Northeastern Quebec Agreement in 1978, the Naskapis were able to begin talking about having their own community, because we were nomadic, but we were kind of living in areas that we were sharing with our neighbors of the Innu. So after the signing of the agreement, the community began to create its own community, I guess you could say, and we've really flourished. I came back last year and I can't believe how busy we are as a small community, as a small nation. We're about 1,000 Naskapis. So just a little brief about my community. So when I go back to my experience as a little girl growing up here, again, like a lot of the time spent on weekends, week-long trips when the caribou was still like roaming here in my community. This is really these images capture of my upbringing. These images capture of what I was exposed to as a learner myself, as a little girl. However, when I came into the classroom, these were not necessarily asked about me. These were not necessarily talked about. So there's this sense of going into the classroom, there was a disconnect. And when I did my master's degree, it really, I'm skipping a slide, I'll go back to that, but this is what the Naskapis want. This is what the Naskapis value when it comes to education. And we have our children at the center of it all. We do all of this for our children, and it's always been like that for the Naskapis. We move for our children, we hunt for our children, we take care of our children. Everyone is there for each other. And so when we as a school here think about, well, what does it mean for Naskapi to be Naskapi first? There are four main elements that often will be referred to. Do our children have opportunity to connect to the land? Do our children have an opportunity to connect to our elders? Do our children have an opportunity to connect to the greater community? Because the school is just one part of that. It's one piece of our children's learning journeys. And do our children connect to a knowledge system through the language? Do we do enough of that? And these are questions we're beginning to think about. These are conversations we're beginning to push for. Although it's always been a value of the Naskapi, it's never been valued in a school setting. And this is one of my biggest roles since I've come home. Is I lived 10 years in Quebec City. I worked with Sarah and Cynthia, but last year I decided to come home to really push for these type of conversations because I knew if we don't do anything soon, we're going to lose who we are. Our kids are not going to know who they are, and that just, to me, is just heartbreaking to think about. So as teachers, we're often always asking ourselves, is it Naskapi first? Does it allow for the learning spirits to be grounded in the identity of our children, in our roots, in our knowledge, so that it's part of a lifelong journey? Does it allow for our children to learn in a holistic process where it's connected to community and the land, where there's a deep spiritual and cultural connection to land and water, where Mother Earth is what grounds us? Do we do enough of that? Do our lands allow us to speak and think and interact in our Naskapi language? Because we know that our language provides a sense of belonging, a sense of continuity among a collective, a deep connection to a knowledge system that grounds the individual. Do we transmit knowledge through our Naskapi language with our elders and knowledge keepers? Because we know that's necessary for life. And do we do it together as a shared responsibility? So when we're always talking about how we teach the language, what we do in the classroom and outside of the classroom, we're always reminded of this, do we, and it always goes back to the four questions. Do we do the four here? Do we do what the four that we know our community values, what our community expects, but also what our elders expect? Do we do enough of that? And unfortunately, we don't do enough. And we're seeing it in the day-to-day ways of how we do things, how we operate in the school, how, like I said, we're shifting from what used to be preserving language to now revitalizing our language. We're really at a critical point. So always going back to the four. I'm just checking up my time. So this, the merging of the two rivers image, I'm putting out here now because I'll be referencing a lot to which river we paddle on. This image I had my cousin draw for me when I was doing my master's degree. When I was doing my master's degree, in university, they expect you to write about your project, your thesis, which I had to do. However, I found that very difficult to write about something that I experienced, to write about something that, okay, there's, okay. Sorry, I was distracted by the message. To write about something that I felt needed to be in an image, because an image to me speaks clearer than words. An image is more powerful. So you see in this image, two rivers, right? The top river and the bottom river. So the top river represents the Indigenous way of knowing and being. So the Naskapi way of knowing and being. And on this river, my people, I knew, and my people know how to paddle it. We know how to navigate it. We know how to be on this river. And this is through our upbringing. These are through our stories, our interaction with our elders, and the connection we have to the land allows us to paddle on that river. And then when it comes to the second river, you can see they're very distant from each other. Our children have to leave that river to come paddle the second river in order to succeed in the Quebec education system. And this is exactly how I experienced it as a learner myself. It felt like I had to get off of this canoe to paddle someone else's canoe, often not valuing who I am, not valuing my language, not even asking me, what does it mean to be Naskapi? What's important to the Naskapi people? And this went through CEGEP, and it went to when I was doing my undergraduate degree at Bishop's as a teacher. Learning is defined differently in two rivers, but never was I asked to share what learning meant to us in our river. So the conversation I have with teachers today, it's really like, we know our children need to know certain skills, but it's equally as important of knowing who they are, where they come from, and knowing their stories, their roots, their language. So with the work I'm doing with teachers in language, we're asking ourselves, well, how can we merge the two rivers? How can we ensure that our children don't have to choose one river over the other, which how I felt I experienced my learning. I always felt I had to paddle the second river, which I did very, very well because I went through post-secondary, CEGEP, undergraduate, and all that. I succeeded in all that. But as a sacrifice, I had to leave my community to go get those, to get my degrees. I had to, as a teacher myself, coming back home into my community, focus on the second river because you have to have marks, you have to have competency development, you have subject-based, all of that, which disconnects. There's a disconnect in how I saw learning, how I experienced learning. So you can imagine the internal war I was feeling myself. I'm always asking these questions. Why does it have to be this way? And this is what led me to do my master's research. So competency 15 is something that I hold dear to my heart because it's really what my people want in teachers. It's really how we want our schools to experience learning, how we want our children to experience learning, but also teachers that come work in my community to experience learning. And there's a shift happening because the questions now become, how can we merge the two rivers? How can we allow our students to walk in balance where the Naskapi step first is first and the most important one? And how do we encourage them to walk in balance? And this is the work I'm doing in my community. So for us, we have a Naskapi curriculum department, which I am a coordinator of. However, that's expanded beyond the school, where our goal, it's really to value and strengthen the connections to the culture, to the language, to the land, and the knowledge in all learning settings. And I say all learning settings, the in and outside of the school. And this is the mandate we have as a school. So in my community, we teach Naskapi up to grade 2, and then the transition from Naskapi to English. And we're really day-to-day talking about these things, thinking about these things. Are we doing enough? What can we do more? Are we allowing our children to know who they are, where they come from? And we're a very small team. We're only 4, but we're expanding because we see the needs of more and more people supporting such work. So really, you know, when it comes to when we talk, the teachers, I work with the preschool, kindergarten, Cycle 1 teachers, the Naskapi teacher that teaches Naskapi grade 3 to 6, and we have a secondary Naskapi culture teacher. And really, it's really using our stories to bring what we value to the table. Wait, I just can't see that right now for some reason. Yeah, using our stories through our words to bring perspective to life. That's really the goal of the conversation we have, trying to move away from looking at this predefined competency development and really tying into what we value first, then go to the competitors. You know, we're changing how we do things as teachers. Just quickly for the Naskapis, we are a people of Caribou and always have been at you. It's really who we are as a community. Everything stems from the Caribou, from food, shelter, all of that, but also the stories, the way of being, how we used each part of the Caribou to make certain things, how different organs of Caribou was used for medicine, tradition, all of the ceremony. It really is who we are. But we're in a time where it's been about, I want to say 12 years that the Caribou have not been coming to our community. So you can imagine all the knowledge of what I remember as a little girl seeing Caribou like walk freely in the community. It was normal to spot a Caribou daily, to now not seeing any Caribou. The amount of knowledge our children are not being exposed to, that are not learning about, that it's not part of their separate conversation like it was for mine. My father talking about the Caribou herd, when it's coming, which direction. There's 12 years of that not happening. And this is why I felt the responsibility to come home, because I was really worried about, if this is the essence of who the Naskapis are, and 12 years and this Caribou have not been coming around, what are we doing about that? What are we doing about that to fill the gap? And, elders have shared their reasons why the Caribou are not coming. Like, we have a mining that reopened 12 years ago. Climate change. They say that it does happen in cycles where Caribou will not come for about 15, 20 years, but will come back. So, this has happened before, but how do you do it in a time when our kids are not using the language, because English has taken a lot of space in the school and in our home? So I just wanted to briefly talk to you about that, as how this is who we are, this is who we still want to be, but how do you do it in a time where we're not getting just the basic Caribou coming here? We have to go far to hunt, and we're limited to how much we can kill, and we're limited to how many kids can actually go on a hunting trip, because of money, because of time, because teachers don't want them to go long periods of time, because they lose on learning. So it's working through, this is one of the challenges we face, because we're so used to the Quebec education system. We're working on challenging that. And this is one of the roles I do in my community. So here are some pictures when we do have a great Caribou hunt and we get Caribou brought into the community on the plain. We set up as much as learning opportunities we can with our students. And here's a picture of one of our eldest elder. Her name is Susan, and she is showing the kids how we remove the hide, the fur from the hide to make, because it's like a 6-step process. She talks about where she used to do this, her role as a woman, because not everyone would do this. In the middle picture, you have young men who are making pemmican which is a delicacy to have. So they're learning the process of how it's done, and you can see that it's only boys because it's a male job. Women don't do that, and there's reasons behind it, and they're told these reasons. And here's a picture of the drum, which is something that we don't practice as much anymore. It was something that wasn't really passed down because of religion, basically, where elders felt that it was evil, but it wasn't them to say that, it was really the missionaries that said that. So the Caribou, it was everything. It is everything, who we are, where we want to go, what we want to be. And just connecting all of this, there are multiple ways where a teacher can bring that into the classroom. But what do we do when we're so used to doing the different, like the steps of preparing of the hide as teachers? How do you bring that to students? We only have pictures, we only have videos, but how do we bring that to language? It's really, really challenging for teachers. And they often say, like, how do I do it when I was taught to do it with my grandma, where I was actually doing it, to now where I don't have this material to teach our kids? How do we do it where the learning is still as experienced as how I did it? And these are day-to-day questions we have as educators. So, you know, when I talk about the Naskapis and a lot of the teachers that I work with, we always go back to that time, the time of when we were still nomadic, the time before we settled into Shefferville, and bringing those stories to life, because in those stories, there's so much language, there's so much knowledge, there's so much learning of ways of being, who we are, how we saw the world, how we see the world through those stories. So our conversations really stem from that point in time where we remember hearing about Fort Chimo Gatanoch, you know, Tio Gatat, you know, when we were in Fort Chimo, when the caribou were there. And so as teachers, you know, using those stories to inspire to move forward. And these are, you know, still more pictures of what we have here. And, you know, picture can speak 1,000 words. And share so much. So for this school, our vision, this is our vision. And right now what we're doing in the Naskapi curriculum is the culturally proud and confident students, children. Like we're working on what does that mean? What does that look like? How are we going to do that? How are we going to move forward? And one way we do that is that we teach Naskapi up to grade 2. This is the language that our children are learning to write, read and write. But we're at a time where we're thinking, okay, maybe we're stressing too much of reading and writing. Again, this is not a system that the Naskapis have used. This is colonization pushing that on us. And now we have a school setting that's pushing that on us because we have to evaluate the 3 competencies in literacy, for example. And our teachers are told they have to evaluate the 3. So, you know, there's that part of, you know, unlearning how we were trained as teachers and thinking about the reading and writing. Why is it so important? And who said that? Well, it's the Quebec education system. So we're thinking about ways in where we should be really focusing on oral first, and then reading and then writing. You know, if you can't speak your language, what's the point of reading and what's the point of writing? And we're asking ourselves these questions. And a lot of us say that, well, this system, this syllabic system that our kids are being taught up to grade 2, it's not our system, it's someone else that defined the system for us. And here we are trying to make our language like the way it is in school. But what do you do when the Naskapi language, well, I didn't learn the Naskapi language in school. I learned it on the land with my family. I learned it on land with my elders. So, you know, that approach where we have a lot of questions, we have a lot of concerns, but we're working in a system that is very rigid and doesn't allow for us to go beyond that. But however, with my return home, I feel like I am mentoring these teachers to have a voice in a school. How can we challenge the system and not to be afraid to challenge the system? And these are the relationships I am starting to see evolve in the conversations I have with the Naskapi teachers in the school. So an example of how complex our language is, because I often hear, you know, our language is being compared to English and French. However, our language shouldn't be compared to English or French because the system, the way of talking, the way of being, it's very different from English and French. An example of this is the color of purple. And for us in English, purple is purple. It's a color. But for the Naskapis, this color purple is the color of jam, which comes from blueberries. So you can just see how complex our language is. A simple color, when do we learn colors in pre-KK, right? But there's a complexity behind the color where the teacher actually has to describe why it's called that way. And here's a picture of a little girl, grade 2. I went blueberry picking with them this fall. And if this little girl hadn't seen blueberries and how it's made into jam, learning of the color purple wouldn't be the same as just showing them purple and the word. there's more that teachers have to do to expose our children to understanding why certain words were created as such. And this is just a basic example of how complex our language is. But the complexities shouldn't be a reason why we don't push forward. Because when our children can know what's purple, why we call it purple, and where purple comes from, I just described 3 different knowledges that they have to know. And that's more complex than purple, and we should be celebrating that, and we should be valuing that. But we as teachers are trained to see English as putting words together into sentences, French as putting words together with accents to make a meaning. But what about this? What about this system that we as teachers are unlearning how we teach it? I just wanted to share that example with you. So again, here's our Naskapi chart where our children are being taught to read and write in Naskapi. And some words, well, purple, it's a very long word. Some can be very, very long, some can be short. I know snow can be used in over 50 different ways. Snow is described 50 different ways depending on the size, how fast it falls, when it falls, where it falls. There's certain words related to that. But these are words that our children are not hearing often enough to make part of their day-to-day vocabulary, their day-to-day conversation. And there's a lot that, factor into that. But we as teachers are always asking ourselves, are we doing enough? Do we do enough? And I think the biggest questions we have, or what we've realized, is that this writing system can't be the only way we teach our children to write, to speak Naskapi. By speaking Naskapi, you have to practice speaking it, and the writing and reading comes later. But we're so stressed with, well, because I have to evaluate it, I have to put a mark on it. That becomes us working in the rigidity of the Quebec education system. So as a teacher myself, coming home, this is 10 years ago, this was the context I was working in. So the parents and grandparents speak Naskapi at home. Now it's decreased in how many people actually speak Naskapi in the homes. We have fiber optics, so our kids have quick, very fast internet access. They're in front of a screen a lot of time during the day, and it's mostly in English. Students learn Naskapi from pre-K to grade 2. Like I said, they transition to English after that, where it becomes a subject, 60-minute blocks daily. So you're in full day Naskapi to boom, 60 minutes a day. We have a Naskapi curriculum team. However, we're not enough to meet the demands of this ever-changing language that we're living in. We're overseen by a school board whose decisions we're still following, whose decisions are based on the Quebec education system right now. So when you think of policy and practices, they're not necessarily ours, or they don't reflect how we would do things because we're under a school board. So one of my role is to challenge such decisions, to challenge such policies and practices. And I did my master's degree on the policies and practices of Naskapi language at Jimmy Sandy Memorial School. So a lot of what I share is what was told to me, or is how I experienced as a learner myself. So right now we know that we're learning the language, meaning the written part, the reading part, the system of writing and reading. We've been trained to see learning a language as such. So the unlearning part is where we're really focusing on since I've started working here last year, of how can we learn in the language, meaning how can we bring the learning on the land, where we're outside every day, where we're taking our kids outside, where we have elders or knowledge keepers from the community coming and helping to interact, to build conversations with our kids. How do we do that? How do we move forward? And just the words of learning the language versus learning in the language, teachers could tell you, yeah, we do a lot of learning the language, but we don't do enough of learning in the language. So we're talking about that right now as teachers. We're really working on that. And one of the things I also ask teachers to do is, there's a way to do this where we're not having our children leave one river over the other. We're not asking them to paddle which river is more important, because they'll say the river of Naskapi way of being is more important. But when it comes to success, according to Quebec, how they define it, we have to paddle that second river if we want to succeed. So when we talk about language, we talk about how can we bring both? How can we ensure that our kids walk in balance, paddle on one river and not feeling like they have to leave a river every time, a canoe every time. So it's just by talking about it, by thinking about it, by trying different activities, we've come to realize how we already know enough to move forward. Why do we have to get permission? Why are we waiting for permission? We're taking lead, and a lot of us are mothers. Some of us are grandmothers. I'm not grandma yet, where we're really empowering ourselves as women to take lead on the language. We know that we need to change how we do things. And I get to work with teachers where we're not afraid to move forward. And this is why I feel like I give them the voice, like they give the voice to me. So what we're doing right now is, we're following the season-based, summer, fall, winter, spring, and we're breaking it down. We've started creating our own progression of learning of when we take the different teachings of the seasons, tying into learning opportunities, now going into depth of, okay, what vocabulary do they need to hear? How often should they hear the word fishing, and all of those words that relate to the different teachings. We're really asking ourselves, what do they need to know? What do they need to hear? How often do they need to say it? And who's going to be their guide with them, guiding them in their learning journey? Because we have all of this, and when we think of what's been done to us to where we're at now, we have to start thinking for this next 7 generations. And we're doing that in the conversations we have as a team. Just one little, my own experience as a teacher coming home to teach in 2011. I finished my teaching degree. I came home to teach in my community. I was teaching grade 3. Okay, just a minute. I'm in a school, so. Okay. So when I came home, I had to teach grade 3, where it was kind of like their first year of English. And I felt the pressure to only use English, and that was the philosophy of the school. They were saying, speak to them in English. The real learning happens when they're in grade 3 anyways, even though they were being taught Naskapi. These were things I was hearing at the lunch table in the staff room, unfortunately. And I was quick to believe it because I was such a new teacher that, you listen to the older teachers. But, in the first few months of my teaching, my students were coming in with this very strong Naskapi, very little English, coming in with Innu, which is our neighboring community. We have students that come into our community, come to our school. And the Innu kids are learning French as the second language, a third language. So my kids were coming in with 4 languages, where it was very conversational type languages. They could switch so fast. And so when I was in my classroom, although I was like really trying to push for kids to not speak English, because this is how I was told when I was first teaching, I didn't see that they were using the Naskapi and Innu language to make sense of what they were asked to do. And this is an example, the Grandparents Project. In grade 2, in the school board I work for, our kids have to write an end of year exam. And they gave me the grade 2 exam, and it was a topic on what do pets do for us. And I remember looking at this exam thinking, well, our students don't do pets. We have dogs running freely in the community. Everyone's dog is everyone's pet. So to write about pets and what they do for us will be very difficult. It was so irrelevant anyways. So I took it upon myself to go to the principal and I say, look, the topic that they want us to write about, I'm going to have to really, let's see, like fake it with my students to write about it, because I'm going to be telling them what to write in order to pass. And that's not fair. That doesn't show what they know. But I said, I know it's a topic that it's just going to be so difficult for them to express themselves. So then I said, can I use another topic, but use their framework, use every step of, they have to write a response, they have to write a narrative, they have to talk about, the stories and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, sure, go ahead. And then I said, well, I'm going to talk about grandparents, because grandparents hold a very special place in our hearts. Everyone is connected to a grandparent, whether it's your biological or a family's grandparent, but they just are so important to us that I felt like, oh my God, my students will probably have a lot to say about it. And they did. We used the Naskapi language to really talk about what we were feeling, to really talk about our memories, our emotions, how much we love them, why were they special to us. And I feel like they were able to go into at an emotional level than they would have had it been another topic. Or if I said, no, you have to say it in English, I don't think the way they were expressing themselves of their grandparents would have been the same. And this is an example of how, as teachers and the Quebec education system needs to encourage the use of the first language, and encourage the use of the first language to have a more emotional and deeper connection to what they're sharing and the way they're sharing. But we're so trained as teachers that it has to be in English, it has to be said in English. But as a teacher, very brave of me, for sure teacher, I said, no, I'm doing it this way, because I'm not evaluating how much English they write. I'm evaluating the process of how they're using their first language, their second language, or third language to write in French, right? So it's a different way of how I experienced learning, but also how I saw learning as a teacher. So here's an example. They had to bring in a picture of their grandparent where they were doing something special. And this is about a little boy, grandson, who was learning to make mittens with his grandmother. And now he makes mittens. Like this young boy, he's probably 20 right now. He's my cousin. His name is Oliver. He's able to make mittens. And it stems from these beautiful memories he has from his childhood. But why aren't we honoring that? Why aren't we talking about that in the classroom? Why aren't we bringing such image and bringing to life in the classroom? There's a lot of disconnect happening from what the kids are being asked to write about to what they should be writing about, because it's not only about writing, it's the journey, the memory, the knowledge that they bring to the table. Then we had author's tea, because I really wanted to celebrate the writing that they were doing, and I really believe that because I allowed them to speak in Naskapi, to use Naskapi as a springboard to learn the English and the French and the other languages, allowed to build this pride of, wow, I can use 4 languages in my learning. And as a teacher, I was celebrating that. I wasn't, I wasn't like being no, you have to use English only, because I realized quickly that, wait a minute, I'm not evaluating the final product, I'm evaluating the process. And the fact that they were using English, Naskapi or Innu, and the fact that they could communicate Naskapi Innu, I was just mesmerized in how they were able to do that so fast in a learning setting. And that inspired me to go do my master's degree, which later did I realize, like, wow, there's research out there. And why aren't we using this to celebrate what our children are doing? But we're so trained as teachers to see literacy as writing in English, literacy as writing in French. And I admit that I am one of those teachers that was trained that way, to think that way, but now I'm in the process of unlearning that myself and challenging a system. And I get to do this in my community. So I know I have 5 minutes. So just, another way of we'd like to describe it is that often in Quebec wants to fit the Naskapi way of seeing and being into the square. And what do you do when you fit a circle into a square? You shrink that circle. But why should we have to shrink who we are to fit into the Quebec system? And this is where the Two Rivers falls into play. So the question we have is, how can I take pieces of the square to fit into our circle? And these are the conversations we get to have as teachers. And there are challenges, of course, but I think we're growing as a team now of Naskapi educators moving forward. I get to mentor 14 McGill students who are in the process of becoming teachers. So they're in their second year. I get to be there, mentor them, and ask them to think about these challenges. I get to work with them in building projects that allow us to overcome these challenges. It's very empowering for me because sometimes I'm the only one that, went as far as I did in education to come back home and get to have these conversations in a time where things are changing in the community. So our journey as educators, we're unlearning how we see learning. We know that land is not a place of subjects. We're trained as math, science, social science, and all of that. We're not looking at land as such. So there's that unlearning. We're not measuring it in minutes because our schedule allows us to have 60-minute blocks per period. We're trying to move away from that and unlearn how we try to condense learning into 60 minutes. We know that evaluation, you can't evaluate someone's journey. We can't evaluate how we nourish our learning spirits of our children. We're using our stories to guide our journey as teachers. So we're always talking about what we remember, what we can smell, what we remember touching, how it feels like to bring a learning opportunity to life. And we do that through our stories. We see the land as the first learning setting. We're really shifting that it has to happen in the classroom. It now needs to happen on the land. And like Sarah was saying, the forest schools, we're going to have training in the next few weeks where teachers are ready to have these kind of conversations. And it always comes back to how can we nourish the learning spirits of our children? Because we know that our children that come to our school into a GSMS come from a home, come from a greater family. So our job is to nourish that learning spirit. So what are we doing to nourish it? Because we know when they go back home, it's going to be someone else taking over. So we're shifting of how we see as our teachers. We're now seeing us as, everyone has a responsibility and everyone is here to do this work. So now, thank you.
Miigwech, beautiful words. I want to become a teacher now. So, I like the various frameworks that you provided us. I think they're inspiring. I think we have time for like one question, if unless you answered all the questions. I took a picture of some of the old photos and I sent it to my daughter and I said, hey, this looks like your papa and this one looks like your son, our relatives. So, well, thank you very much. We appreciate both your and Sarah's presentations this afternoon. So you're going to live on forever in the virtual world. This has been taped and I'm sure other people would love to watch your presentation in the future. So I'll just remind people that there's another presentation at 2:45, Arthur Lynn. So don't miss that. And then later on, there's presentations, Simon Bird, Stephanie Tedesco from Getting at ZB, Arthur Lynn again, and Christiana Orbitz from M&P. It's going to talk about negotiating First Nations education agreement. So thanks for all being here this afternoon, and make sure that you come to these other presentations. So Miigwech, Agada.
What'd
So thank you, Adam. So